JD here, Terrell Lewis, and as you can see by the title of this video here today, we're going to be doing another F1 tip segment, and today we're going to be talking about how to master the wet, my tips on how to do it, how I thought it was really important for this game, and what I'd recommend to actually learning it, and what I really think about when I'm actually approaching corners in the wet, my mindset in terms of the setup and the strategy of how you actually approach into every corner and entry and exit as well. This is a world record lap around Brazil. I did Spain yesterday as well, along with Abu Dhabi, and I actually managed to get the world #1 on those tracks. So I might maybe do a series where I'm actually going to maybe go through the wet as well. I know I've still got my dry ones to do. They have all been done. People keep asking me all the time, but unfortunately this week has not been a particularly good week for me, for a few reasons, but we did hit 30,000 subscribers, which I'm planning to do a video on, because I didn't do a video when I got 20,000 subscribers, so I'm going to still include those questions and include any more questions that you may have in this video. I'll include that. I'll pick up the best ones to include on that video whenever I do come across to do that. But this is a world record lap, but we've included some other footage as well, just from racing online really, of how I feel I really approach the corners and what you really do need to think about for this. So I may not talk for this entire video. I've got quite a few little clips here, but this is an online race round Brazil now, and in time trial it's a little bit different because you can't switch fuel mixtures, but I feel the #1 thing in the wet is to definitely play around with fuel mixtures. And I know from watching a lot of people, they don't do this. I've watched it from people who I race with in AOR and just some spectating people as well. You'll be able to see from their driver's hands if actually changing the fuel mixture or anything like that. I feel it's incredibly important to run and lean going through the corners itself. That's definitely the biggest thing I'd say. And in intermediate conditions, I feel this is even more important, which you probably wouldn't think in this game, but in full wet conditions, so the blue tyre here, you could probably just about get away with on some corners in standard mix, but as you can see, we're going rich and going back down to lean. And the reason why I do this, which you may have not already guessed, is it gives you much better traction off corners. Not only saving fuel as well, but it just gives you so much better traction of corners, which we should be able to see. So coming into here, keeping it a lean mix, going through this corner with Jamie in front of us, who's a coordinator in the AOR League, I believe. So see lean mix, and look at the exit we get up here. Look how much traction we get coming off this corner. And setup definitely does help, which I'll be talking about a little bit later. Setup is definitely a key factor, but lean, if I was in rich mix there would be absolutely no way I would be able to get that much traction coming off the corner. So I feel by watching my videos or other people's videos, if you like, you just got to get into the habit of changing from rich to lean as much as possible, especially in wet conditions. You could even argue in the dry is quite important as well. Mainly it's more about tyre wear and just the fuel, not really about getting better traction in the dry, but in the wet it's very, very important to lap time. I feel that you have to change it, and even more so in intermediate conditions, because in intermediate conditions the car feels like it's got even less grip, probably because you're just going faster on a wet tyre. It gives the illusion of that, but I feel it's much harder to control. To go in lean and going back up through here, go back into rich again, so just getting that little burst into straight as much as possible, even though that probably wouldn't have gained you that much, but you could see how much more traction we had coming off that corner there. And as I said, that I feel this is an absolute must in terms of what you really do need to do in the wet. And the wet conditions, I feel, in order to be very good at it, it's all about confidence in just feeling the track. So if you've got force feedback on the wheel, then I'd really recommend turning up as high as possible, obviously without not being in control, because you really do want to feel every oversteer moment, every lockup, every vibration possible. On my controller, it's on 100% force feedback, and you get quite a good feeling of the controller in these games. That 2016 and this game currently, I feel you can feel almost every bump and skid you can do, which is very, very important. Without force feedback, you'd be absolutely lost in the wet. So moving on to some other online lobbies now here today, and we'll be going over just from my other tips what I feel are really important. So the first thing is definitely fuel mixtures. The second thing is definitely setup. You do not want a car that has a lot of ballast. So I think that's the last component on your setup options. Ballast, basically, if you don't know what it is as we think we've been taken out here, which is just standard for sprint mode. But basically, the more you put it towards 11, the more turning you're going to have. So more of the front of the car is going to be really pointy into the corner, but it's going to leave you with a lot more oversteer, because the car just so much more weight going towards the front of the car, so all the weight is just shifting through there. Whereas if you put it to the rear, so back down to 1, you're going to have tons of understeer, but since all the weight's at the back of the car, you're going to have probably better traction, but you're just going to have no turning at all. So you're just going to have most amount of understeer as possible. So going towards 11, most amount of oversteer, but most responsive car, and opposite vice versa. So in the wet, you do not really want to be going towards 11, so where all the weight's shifting at the front, so we have a really pointy car, because your back end, if you can't control it, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to get on the power going through corners, because that's really what you need. It's all about, I feel, about your exit speed going in the wet. For me, there are some corners we have to approach on the entry, but most of the time it's about being really aggressive on the brakes going into it and making sure you get as good exit as possible. Whereas some corners you really do need to attack in the dry on the entry, and you'll lose out a little bit on the exit or compared to what you could have done. But overall, you'll gain actually more time, if that actually makes any sense. But in the wet here, you really do need to think about the exit speed, and hopefully we'll be able to show a little bit of footage of that in the more clips that are coming up through here. But setup is definitely important, as well as the brakes. So ballast, I wouldn't recommend going over 7, to be honest. If you're hitting 8 or 9, you want to be running a lower front wing by about 3 or 4 clicks than the rear wing, because otherwise it's just going to be almost impossible to control. But yeah, I wouldn't go above 7 in the wet. As for the brakes, it's all up to you completely. For me, I run the same brakes that I do in a dry, because I'm just so used to them now. I've managed to adapt myself, but I would run brakes probably more towards the rear. So 56%, if you're going up 57, 58 to towards 100, that's going to be more towards the front. So you're going to be much more prone to locking up in the wet, which is very easy to do. As you can see, the traction we get off here, so going from lean to rich, I know the car's got caught out there, but you can see it just has so much more traction. I think actually after this corner this will be another good example for traction. So going back down to lean, got about the same exit, but look at how much more traction we got as well. But yeah, going back to the brakes, it's something you've got to be comfortable with. Going more towards the front, so going above 56, so as I said, 56, 57 towards 100% range, you're going to be able to brake later, but you're not going to be able to control the lockups as easily. So you're going to get a lot more lockups, you're going to be a lot more prone to locking up, and it's just going to be very difficult to change the direction as well. For me, I would recommend, if you want to get used to the wet, is definitely putting your brakes more towards the rear, so anything below that 56%, so 55, 54. If you do that, then the brakes are going to be more towards the rear, so you're not going to have as many prone to actually locking up at the front. Because once you lock up on this game, you've got to go off the brakes again in order to recover the car. So if you keep on braking here, if I was locking up there, I would just be going straight on. So you have to go off the brakes, which means you actually accelerate more. And you'll be able to see my braking, which we'll be talking about in this clip, this China clip, which is the reason why I included it. You've got to be very, very precise on the brakes, and trail braking is an absolute must on this game. And if you don't know what trail braking is, I'll explain that in a little bit. But as for the braking setup wise, I'd say anything above or anything below 56% on the brakes, I'd say that would be a perfect thing to do. And you can change that on your settings. So in the car settings here, so in the in-game settings, you can see we can actually change that, so you can actually flick it up and down as well. But trail braking now, my third point, which we'll be able to see on this gameplay here, I'm sure hopefully in a couple corners time. But trail braking is basically where you go 100% on the brakes, or maybe not even 100% time sometimes, but you gradually come off the brake as you're going into the corner. So what that is, it basically means you can brake very late without locking up and being able to actually rotate the car through the corners. So going through here now, about 75% on the brakes, and then you can see we're just holding it around 30%, and then we let go of the brake completely as we're turning in. And then the wet, you really don't, it's very rare that you want to be braking 100% power, so all the way down. You want to be braking around about 80%, 70%, and you just get a feel for it. You don't even realise it. As you can see here, we're not even on 100%, so you always want to be hitting about 80 or something, and that's just something you get used to. So going through here now, let's look at it on the bottom right hand side of the screen. So you can see about 80%, and gradually, and as we're about to hit the apex, that's where you want to be going off the brakes completely, because if you just held on to the brake there, so if I just kept my finger on the trigger and I was trying to turn at the same time, then you would just lock your wheels, you'd lock the front wheels straight away. And it's all good watching this gameplay and me telling you this, but obviously it's something that you'll just go realise to do naturally. It's something that will just naturally come to you. And you can see here again, we're hardly on the brakes. We're coming off the brakes and readjusting all the time. It doesn't have to be one smooth motion going down on the brakes. You can see here again, we're only braking about 50% for this, so never really have to go 100% on the brake power here. And we'll be able to see going through this corner, this is probably be quite a good example. So going through here now, mainly let the engine do the braking for you. So you can see here, not really even letting, no, not even really touching the brakes that much. We're just letting the brakes or the engine braking whilst you're in a low gear help you. As you can see coming out here now, taking a wider line, and look at the throttle application, very, very smooth coming up here. You just really want to take your time, which leads me on to the lines you can take in the wet. It's not going to be exactly the same as the dry. I would say do everything a bit later in the wet, so take the apexes later, because if you go in a bit deeper, using the brakes, being very aggressive on the brakes in the wet, if you go in deeper, it gives you, you can actually go on the power earlier, as we've been a little bit spun around there. I feel for me, what really works is braking very late, as late as I can in the wet, but probably about 20 meters earlier than I do in the dry, overshooting the corner slightly, but then be able to snap back, and then you'll be able to actually go earlier on the throttle again. So even though you will lose time on the entry, I feel on the exit you'll just gain that much more time. You actually gain more time on the exit as well. So go and see, you can see through here, held at 80%, 50, just about holding it through there. But with the combination of all these techniques and obviously a lot of practice, I feel this is what really, really helps me. As I said, my driving style is to brake very late, so braking in a straight line as well, again, which I think is really important, overshooting the corner, and just trying to make sure the wheel is straight before we go and pull full power. So you can see here, 80%, about 80%, still 80%, and you can see as we were taken out there, but as the wheel's straight, that's really where you want to be going on 100% power. You do not really want to go on full gas while you're turning, because if you do that, you're going to be a very, very big oversteering mode. So you can see here, almost 100%, so about 80%, still not quite, just about 100%. You can see as the wheel's straight, that's when you want to be going on full power as well. So you can see another trail braking here again, with the use of lean mix. As the wheel's straight, now it's straight, that's when we go on full power. So hope that was a nice little detailed video of some clips here as well. Hopefully you have found that useful, but that is just basically my mindset when I'm approaching the wet in the corners, of braking very late, using lean mix through the corners as the wheel's straight, do a late apex so you're early on the throttle, and that's where you go get the best exit. So I hope this has been an informative video. Thank you so much for the support recently, and I will catch you next time.